And welcome back. And we're moving into our first conversation this morning. We're joined by two representatives from two different organizations that have come together to produce this report. And we have on set Simone Hill, who is the coordinator and president of PETAL. And we have Caleb Orozco, who's the executive director of UniBAM. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
So, this is an effort of a coalition of organizations. And one of the first things I want us to talk about is just how and why this group came together for this purpose.
Okay. First of all, in our history, there's never been a coalition of LGBT anything before. And in our history, there's never been a coalition of CSOs brought more broadly to address LGBT issues. And so collectively, it was felt that it was a mechanism for us to work together on issues of common concern, one, and two, it gives more political weight to what our concerns are as an LGBT population living in this country. So that's the context of pulling a report that is coalition-led.
And the organizations that are involved, let's go through that.
Yes, it includes UniBAM. It also includes PETAL, Trans in Action, TIA. It includes Empower Yourself Belize Movement, EYBM, and Belize Youth Enhancement Movement, BYEC. BYEC, right?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And these are all organizations that work with the specific LGBT community.
To be clear, a couple are LGBT inclusive, the rest are LGBT led and specific to LGBT issues.
Okay.
Could you talk to us about the importance of doing these international reports?
Well, let's start with the first report in 2009. In 2009, the government of Belize didn't think that it needed to even comment on LGBT Belizeans. And back then, I had engaged Philip Palacio on this issue, and he acknowledged that this issue would come up and that the government of Belize wasn't ready. And so for us, it was one, to get a formal position of government in regards to how they perceive LGBT Belizean. And boy, did we get a formal position of government when they responded in the report that we got back. But it was funny because in 2013, when they had a chance to review what was discussed, and when we had a chance to review the report, it was surprising to see a political shift in tone. And I say surprising because we never saw a single paragraph, a single sentence on LGBT Belizean in any of these kinds of reports. So that was important.
Yeah.
The second thing what we saw was a sense of responsibility in regards to how the state of Belize responded in the report. And I say a sense of responsibility because Belize as a state could have ignored all the recommendations completely or could have been totally irresponsible. It wasn't. And so that's important. The third thing about that is the report itself, it acts as a diplomatic tool, if you will, on our end. It's a long-term tool that is complemented with litigation, with diplomatic engagement, with personal political engagement, and it's an examination as to how far we could have taken our issue. Specifically, there was an agreement in 2009 to two recommendations. One that speak of the feasibility study for the National Human Rights Institute, and one that spoke about developing a National Human Rights Institute. In 2018, our community met with the foreign minister, and in that meeting, he finally said to his staff, listen, and I'm paraphrasing, go find out how we can do the feasibility study. And literally, I think it was a week or a few days later, I saw the head of, or a representative from the Office of the High Commission show up at my office asking, so what are your concerns? And she said, essentially, I'm going to meet the foreign ministry tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And so, as part of that process, you recognize the long-term investment in transformation, and it's part of a pressure process that forces change, but change doesn't happen without some kind of pressure mechanism.
I want to backtrack a little bit just to set the background because one of the things I think that perhaps we haven't made clear is that when we sign on to conventions, international conventions, a part of our responsibility is to be able to report back and indicate the progress that we're making. In this case, we're talking about human rights and how much the government, as the leaders in the nation, are working towards ensuring that each individual in this country is being afforded what is allowed for under the convention. So your periodic reports that you're talking about are reports that should be submitted by the government saying, we've done this, we're working on that, and that's what you're referencing. I just wanted to be clear. There's also a mechanism in place where non-governmental organizations or civil society organizations can also submit reports to the UN as well, so that you have your own perspective if there's a different one. Has there been an NGO report or a CSO report submitted before talking about the state of human rights in Belize?
With regards to the more broader discussion about the state of human rights, I don't think that report has ever been inclusive of LGBT Belizeans.
Okay.
So that's problematic by itself, and it shows that there's a structural problem with how we understand human rights when we report to international obligations.
Yeah.
Because for Belize, for example, there are other treaty obligations like the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights. There's a Convention Against Torture. There's the Convention for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And the list goes on and on. There's a Convention on the Rights of a Child. And these are examples where, though these are human rights framework or international treaty obligation, nobody has took it upon themselves to actually report on LGBT Belizeans per se and what that means. And so what you learn is that a country may sign on, but they may not necessarily invest the time, the money, the resources in giving life to these treaty obligations. And so it's CSO's responsibility to ensure that the meaning of those obligations are met in some way or some form.
If you look at the UPRs, the Universal Periodic Reports for the country on a whole, it's kind of sparse compared to some other countries. And of all the human rights issues that the country is having, right now we're dealing with the issues with the justice system.
Of course.
How do you think the balance should play out in terms of the reporting? Because it's almost like a name shame, almost like you're shaming yourself as the government to say, listen, I have not done all that I'm supposed to do, and so I kind of cover it up in the report. How do you think that the state should balance between shaming itself and actually reporting the honest truth as to where it is on this international issue?
Well, one of the things I learned first is that as citizens, we have a civic responsibility to pressure our state to do better. As citizens, we have failed or we have been complicit by omission, indifference, and inaction in our own mistreatment. And I say in our own mistreatment because we do not take any significant action as citizens to use whatever governance structure we have, in this case, the court, to hold government accountable for its lack of progress. With regards to the state have been very good at acknowledging its shortcoming, using terms like not having technical personnel or resources to report on its other treaty obligations, asking for support. But the state itself is under no obligation to actually move further than acknowledging that there's a problem. And so in there lies the problem, because what it's showing is that we have weak enforcement mechanisms, and civil society, whether it's environmental, whether it's indigenous, whether it's person with diverse ability, is weak in acting as an enforcement mechanism to bring that change or to bring that accountability. In fact, civil society, in my mind, has never looked at environment, indigenous, women's rights, children's rights, and the lot as a civil rights framework, as a framework that is about development and that is collectively pushing us forward. It's never looked at the issue from a civil rights lens. And so that is the next structural problems in the broader discussion what human rights is. And so we need to change that.
So I want to move forward with the conversation to delve into the report a bit. So you worked along with this coalition comes together, and essentially what you're documenting in your report are human rights violations. You know, because it's the first time you're submitting this report, it dates back, I think, as far as 2007, I think I saw one.
No, 2009.
Yeah, 2009. Now, if anyone reads this report and sees some of these particular cases that are brought out, it paints the image of a horror story, from bullying to not receiving health care and people dying as a result of not receiving health care, to being evicted from homes. You know, my first question is, how do we validate what's being reported in this report?
Well, first, let me reference the recent population size estimate of 2018. In that report, it highlights exactly what the issues are in percentages. So that's one. With regards to the UN poll of 2013, there's a reference that highlights some of the issue. In regards to some track studies done by the organization PASMO, it highlights some of the issues. Now, one of the things I love with the culture of denialism is if it never happens to you, it doesn't exist. And I like that attitude, because if it doesn't exist, then you as a citizen don't exist. And so this age-old argument that Belize isn't a horrible place ignores some fundamental point. And that point is that when it comes to the poor, when it comes to persons with diverse ability, we don't have the market cornered on discrimination and violence and social problems. There's so many other groups that are experiencing similar things, but they choose to shut up. The problem with shutting up is that nobody understands the common experience we have as citizens. And so there's no effort to move things forward. And so that is the context of this.
My question is, where do these incidents, where do the reports for these incidents originate? I'll give you an example. Some of them very clearly say that there was no police action taken. Right. There was no report made. You're talking of issues of people seeking political asylum, intervention by the British government to get a release of a passport by a person who's held what seemingly because they are an LGBT person, or they appeared to be that way. So I'm just saying, so people feel that this is validated information. Where do the incident reports come from? Well,
one of the things is that at UniBAM, and it's a good question, because even myself, before I truly came into structured advocacy, as I like to say, people do come and complain. And I myself, at one time, had a complaint to UniBAM. As Caleb was keeping these list of documenting these lists of human rights violations. And I think that UniBAM started off with young men who were identifying themselves as cross-dressers, gay men who were being harassed by the police. So over the years, these stories, anecdotal though they are, have been collected over the years, and it is by real people. They are happening to real people, and we keep these logs. And when PETAL started, the same thing, we realized that women, quite like myself and other women, started coming, reporting. Once people know that you are advocating or doing something for them or on their behalf, they start coming to you with the stories and letting you know. And so with the Caribbean Vulnerable Communities Coalition, we were on the show and we spoke about that. Yeah. I touched on that a little, that they have created this Sydney database, and there are organizations like PETAL, UniBAM, EYBM that are collecting data on human rights violations. And this is not just for the LGBT community, but for the entire populace. And out of that, you get where you're specifically going to people who identify as LGBT. So you are getting stories.
I'm curious as to why you call the stories anecdotal.
Some people will just tell you a story.
For fun, for comedy.
No, never for fun.
Not
You mean like not taking responsibility and say it happened to my friend?
Yeah,
kind of
something
thing?
like
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and some of the stories are what happened to them. So they will tell you it straight, directly, that it happened, because people, even though like myself, I think this is when you do advocacy and you decided to step out, like you cannot understand why another person would not step out. So like like they're telling you something, but it is nearly like it's not happening to them because people are still afraid in this 21st century.
So I want to add, we have the oldest or longest running database, which is over 380 cases so far. And through our investigation, specifically through specific parts of the legal profession, surprisingly, we came across 14 additional suspected cases of bias-motivated crimes, which we need to investigate. With regards to data collection, not only does it come directly from the victims or survivors of the violence, it comes from witnesses, it also comes from us tracking your news reports. We've seen in one particular case, after the victim was murdered brutally, that person ended up murdering somebody else, and that person is now in jail. And we find out through the news reports, we actually collect evidence of some of the statements that were issued in court, and that's how we track some of the information. Other times it's Facebook, other times it's a family member reporting, and what we do is keep a long record of all that have occurred.
So just to understand the purpose, because we want people to know why this report is important and what the intention is behind it. And when you compile a list of what are some of unimaginable forms of discrimination in our country, people don't like looking in the mirror. We don't like hearing the worst versions of ourselves. So many may accuse this coalition of saying, why are you painting Belize like that? It's not really that bad. What do you say to that?
Well, I'll give you a story that is happening right now. And I'll say it this way. A person I know just died, literally just died. And because the emotion is raw, there's this whole thing about whether the partner could get his clothes, his books that he needs to use for his work, the TV, the washing machine that they bought together. His partner is being prevented from getting all of those things. And his partner just died a few days ago. It's quite possible that his partner may have been affected by something else, health-wise. He's afraid to deal with that, and he doesn't have the energy to deal with the anger that comes with that. What does he do? Does he just wall up his tail and continue his way, knowing full well that his partner isn't even in the ground yet, and there's nothing he can do? That's the kind of disrespect that you won't see in the media, on the news, in a police report, because it is so deeply personal.
Yeah, and Marlene, why Belize is, we don't like, some people don't like that you put Belize out there and say it isn't bad and things like that, but it is happening to people. And groups like us would not exist if these things were not happening. And why contain it? Why let it fester? Why not say, why not get your government to address these things and get the people to address it also? If we would all be honest about it, it would be addressed. And when, like I was telling Caleb, with the UPR, when I came in contact with it and knew about it, I wanted him to let us talk about it. And if not by bringing a national consultation, why not come on the media and speak about it, even if it is just a little bit, to let people be conscious that this thing is happening. Yeah. And so hold your government accountable, hold whoever. And the Constitution, 1981, we got independence, a Constitution was written up, and the laws still don't come in conformity with it. And you and everyone can speak about how things are not right where it concerns human rights. Lawyers a lot can talk about the human rights of people that are believed to be gang members and things like that. They are always fighting on behalf of the guys out there because they are lumped up into this one group of people. So let's hold the government accountable. Belize is a wonderful place. Our government tries, but we still need to push them.
Now, I want to go straight there. I had another question, but you pushed me to my second question, which is that even the Human Rights Commission, of which I am the vice president, is split on this issue. It might not be a public thing, but everybody has their own view of it.
Human rights is clear, sir.
No.
There's no split on human rights.
I'm talking to you about the views of different people in the commission itself.
Granted.
But part of the discussion is the schizophrenia of the Constitution, which is that some people say that in the same Constitution where there is an ode to human rights, which must include, to my mind, the LGBTI community, we're all people. But at the same breath, there is a nod to the supremacy of God. And so there is a paradox, so to speak, between what the concepts of the religious community feel are godly principles and what human rights are. And so natural human rights principles, which cover everything, seem to be at competition. How do you address that?
There's no
constitutional?
paradox. There's no paradox. Your people need to go back to law school
No.
to understand the supremacy of God.
Wait, we're venturing into a whole different conversation. But I think it can be used in a broader context
Granted.
too. Yeah.
Okay, in governance, what it alludes to is that we don't understand governance. If we did, this wouldn't be in discussion. In governance, and especially in the preamble, the Constitution speaks to citizen. And it doesn't matter whether you have a moral position or a legal position or a secular position, the term citizen doesn't change. So this is really, for me, not a conversation to go nowhere. The principle of human rights is established. You have a responsibility to address the quality of life of your citizen. If we were to be governed on moral positions alone, half the men in this country would be jailed for their stupidity, and the women will be treated a certain kind of way because they have tolerated that stupidity. So let's be clear about that. If we were to use just pure moral position, all the priests and pastors who have questionable moral issues will be gone. We are not governed by morality. We are governed by a principle that respects the diversity of our people, which upholds the dignity of our people. In fact, the preamble says it best. The state is required, it's not a choice. It is required to address the social economic disparity between citizens. It is our job to give that some meaning. That's it.
Now, I hear the point that Kevin is saying, although I think I'm still shocked that you have views like that in your Human Rights Commission. You know, human rights are, once you are born as a human being, you are entitled to these rights. And there's no quantifier or qualifier as to who's more human or more deserving or less deserving of rights. But the point is that what I see very clearly in your report is where you're showing that the laws don't conform to this convention that we say we want to implement. And that's where I feel that that's the bigger issue. Your recommendations are saying clearly, this law does not allow, the gentleman, the example you gave, there's no recourse. You can't go to the police and report it. There's no legal process, as far as I know, that they can go through.
No.
So that's where the push is going. Here are the examples of these things that are happening to people because they identify as trans or LGBT, and you want the mechanisms in place. Talk to me about the recommendations that are being put forward.
Well, one of the things when you speak about crime and violence, and I always think about the hate crime and hate speech, and people believing that that these things are right, that they can bully you, that they can say whatever they want and things like that. And I would like to see that change, because not only for LGBT people, for the entire citizenry of Belize, women are especially vulnerable to this, and girls. And so though that's one of the recommendations that I will that I want to push. And by the way, Marlene and Kevin, I must say that I will be representing the coalition at the UPR Advocacy Week, right?
Wow.
And so that is one of the things that I would like to see, and more where even though some training have been done through the NAC with police, the police and things like that, for human rights issues, I think that there can still be more that can be done, or at least follow up. One of the things is we do these trainings and there are no follow-ups on it. And there are a ton there. I think we have so much recommendations there, and so maybe you'd like to speak on a couple of them.
There's some very practical things.
Yes.
For example, I shouldn't have to walk into the Orange Walk Police Department and be ignored because I am a young 14-year-old who looking feminine. Or I shouldn't have to experience the idea that I'm in a traffic accident and the police department thinks it's more of a priority to go get beer in the truck that they were donated to than to go and deal with that accident. I shouldn't have to be trans, and the first thing I hear is get out of the station and I want to deal with you. I shouldn't. I'm a citizen. If you're a police officer, you're supposed to do your duty and respond. I shouldn't have to walk to the police department and have them tell me, wait 30 minutes, come back. I shouldn't. I shouldn't have to walk into the hospital and wait 45 minutes to 4 hours to get a medical legal form signed because it's not an emergency and the evidence of my bruises are going away. I shouldn't have to be a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old child and have to have an argument between the hospital administrator and the police department who should have the rape kit. That is not what these things should be. The police department, for example, I believe does not have a policy on addressing victims of crime in a non-discriminatory manner. It does not have, and the list goes on and on.
I want to jump in there because isn't there a sensitivity training that's allowed to for that the police department goes through? Because some of the things I've read in exactly what you're saying, name calling as soon as the person walks in, saying somebody deserves something because they look like this or they engage in this activity, or being ignored in a system. Isn't there, from your knowledge, some kind of sensitivity training?
The first thing you learn is that the people who need sensitization are the ones at the top, and they have to come with their own problems. How the department functions is a reflection of how their values are trickled down, or in this case, how they perceive things as priority. That, to me, is where the effectiveness of change happens. The rest of it comes later.
But it's more so than just the way the police department is structured. The police department is a reflection of the entire society. It's not just the bosses at the top. And so that is as a follow-up to where I was going, which is that part of advocacy must be to meet the people you're speaking to where they are. There can't be a misconception that this is where it ought to be, and so you talk past that. The reality is that Belizeans are unable to see the person. I remember, and if you allow me, I remember there's a movie where the attorney is speaking to a jury and he describes a very gross situation. And at the end of it, he says, no, pretend that she's black. And it allowed the jury in this movie, I think it was To Kill a Mockingbird. it allowed the jury to take away all of the biases that you might have and see the person who is suffering. One of the things I like about the way that the report that was done is because it peels away all of the things that, all the fears and biases that someone might have, and see a person who is just suffering. And I think that when you're dealing with the LGBTI issue, you have to allow Belizeans, who are fun-loving people, to look at the person and not to look at their religious bias or their hate that they might have. Could you talk to us about how to utilize this report locally? Because as much as we talk to the international community, what you want is to live here like everybody who hurts here lives. Am I right?
Absolutely. And so this is a conversation about creating a culture of empathy, and this is a conversation about integrating some of the concerns into platform issues like HIV, like gender. And it's funny you should talk about using an intersectional approach, or allude to the idea of using an intersectional approach. A few weeks or a couple of months ago, I believe it was somebody from, a consultant from the Women's Commission emailed me and says, so what are you doing on this objective? And I outlined it and I go, but we could do a lot more. But this is a conversation about those who are in position of influence or power to then integrate those interventions into where they are. Yeah. We aren't doing sufficient of that, and that's a problem. And so it builds on itself. It's integrating training into the police school. It's talking about these issues more broadly around discrimination in the healthcare system, because LGBT issues is just one component of what the discriminatory conversation needs to be about. Sexism, another layer, and so on and so on. So this is where we are now.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is, I think of what it would have been like had all these cases been brought to the media, been put in a police report. Yeah. But if we're to be very honest and use the key word, empathy, we see some of the rape cases in this country, whether statutory or other forms of rape. People are very unforgiving. This report includes some names. It includes the persons who are, some are nameless, and some do have that type of information. Are these people now comfortable putting this information out there and saying, this happened to me on this day, in this place? I was forced to give oral sex to a person because they thought I was gay. I was denied, a rape kit for a 9-year-old. I'm trying to find different instances that are there, but are these people now comfortable with this, that the names are included in the report?
I would say this: no person who experiences kind of, pain is going to just go in front of a camera and say X, Y, and Z. So you'll never get them to speak. And we know this when it comes to somebody who experienced a murder or is a relative of a murder victim. They're going to speak off camera. Period. So that's the reality.
Now, I want you to talk to us about timing and what this, because if you look at the report, the recommendations in terms of making legislative changes, constitutional changes even, which includes same-sex marriage, and to me, very simple things like just allowing for division of matrimonial property, so to speak. This is a simple thing. Both people contributed to it. Piece of it is naturally for one as well as the other. And if they were a heterosexual couple, it would have been an easy no-brainer to go through.
Absolutely.
And so the economic part of it is a bit confusing as to why, which is just be a simple change of a word, which I don't think would be offensive to anyone, because it's a reality of the experience that the two people are having. But talk to us about overall timing and what the report does to get Belize to the place where it should be in terms of respect for all its citizenry and everyone who is hurting?
Jump in whenever you feel like. First, we have some very basic principles in our Constitution: equal protection under the law. Second, if you recognize that we are a country with 43% poverty rate, if you recognize that the family is actually our social safety net as we grow older, if you recognize that 75% of our LGBT people will not have children, it becomes really an important discussion to have in regards to what is your protection against poverty as you grow older. And if there isn't an answer, when you add the fact that the state does not provide any significant social assistance program for persons who are older, you begin to recognize that the value of relationship security or marriage equality has to be addressed sometime down the road. For us, it's a very simple matter of survival. And if you are 60, 70, why should you have to go back in the closet because somebody will knock you off your feet and the only thing you can do is to say, I deal with the bruises and walk off because you don't have the resources to defend yourself? Why should you have to tolerate going into a hospital and a medical provider tell you, get out because you're not blood? You've been with that person for 10, 11, 12 years. Why should you have to get permission? If the value of dignity for me as a citizen is there, and the value of dignity as a citizen is for everybody else, I'm not asking anybody to protect my dignity. I'm telling you, you must recognize the value of my dignity. If you understand anything about empathy and the principle of equal treatment under the law, it does not treat me as an undocumented immigrant. I am a Belizean citizen first and foremost, and as a citizen, I expect the same treatment as everybody else.
The reason I asked that in terms of timing is because when you look at the report, I think it was very eloquently put that even though there has been some pullback from the state, that it took a judgment from the court to get it done. But I think it is either Trinidad or Guyana, where there's a bishop who has gotten a petition to get the Bugri law reversed. And so I guess the general trust of and I think this was in a report last night, I was looking at the Caribbean news, but the trust was that that society wasn't ready to come out of the closet as a society to say, listen, we do have this population in us and we don't want to be represented as having this population. So I wanted to go back to my question, which is, how much does these international reports do to change the timing of where we are as a society?
Okay, great. Well, keeping it real, the report by itself means nothing. It's just a record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you add litigation, the development of a leadership structure, when you add resource mobilization, a strategic plan, political engagement, and a commitment to short-term and long-term action, it becomes a powerful tool that is one layer of a wider framework. And when you understand that when it comes to civic responsibility and the investment that the state has made a lot of investment in liberation. And I mean things like knowledge transfer, personal development, and these are things that goes around maternal care, HIV prevention, blah, 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 blah. But when you understand where the state falls, which is the civil rights or enforcement mechanism, you begin to understand the importance of transformation and why long-term investment is important. The timing itself is part of the 5-year cycle of the Universal Periodic Review. The timing itself, while it's complementary, it is just one step in a very long basis for change.
Now, these reports, once submitted, there is feedback provided to the government by the UN itself. Are you hoping that that will be part of that, the issues that you've raised and the recommendations, that this will kind of spur action into better protection for this marginalized community?
One can only hope because
That's the ideal goal, right?
yeah, one can only hope because like we said at the beginning, 2009, 2013, and there have been recommendations to the government where it concerns sexual orientation and gender identity issues, and as far as I can see, there has been nothing done on it. Representing the coalition at, in Geneva, the Advocacy Week, to lobby people, it's not something, and I want to say this, that personally for me, I don't know why like we would have to go to the UN to lobby to get diplomats and other people to talk to our government. Like, why we cannot just do it, why they cannot just understand, like, from here, as an advocacy group, we would like these things to be addressed. We're citizens of this country. Some years ago, I spoke about that, being a citizen, born in and raised in Belize, and knowing a lot of these people that represent us at the governmental level.
And you don't, sorry, not include, but you don't factor in the political backlash.
Well, I was going to get to that. I think one of the things that we do have to talk about here is that, you know, leaders of our country are ultimately politicians, and politicians respond to public opinion. And so we know that there is still a very large population that feed into the discrimination that you speak of. Have you ever done, and this leads me to where one-on-one, because you're right, traveling to another country, talking to high-level diplomats, hoping they will then speak to government leaders, it's kind of going around it the long way. But have you ever had one-on-one engagement with, you spoke of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, in trying to lobby them to take up the cause? There's human development, there's the special envoy, there are several people who can maybe have some kind of internal pressure, can add to internal pressure.
These things have been done, and looking at it with the constitutional challenge that was put up, it was because of doing one-on-one consultations with people that are influential to the politicians. And so that have been done. And when we think about how the same thing, I remember meeting a minister going on a trip, and he was talking about numbers, who is behind you. That's another thing to say that, you know, like, again, the disrespect of citizens in the country, no matter how you identify. And our politicians need to realize that citizens, no matter what it is, they are going by votes, but what it is, people put you there to do a particular thing. Just do it. You understand me? Because whether or not you're going to be voted out will be based on your performance anyway. So why not do something good? Why not protect the citizens, whether they identify as LGBT or not?
But you're talking more of a more targeted, narrow, one singular issue, like anti-discrimination legislation. Mm-hmm. A lot of the work between our coalition is leading up to that. But the anti-discrimination legislation is a legislation for everybody. Mm-hmm. And the challenge is first getting the cabinet note refined. Second, sensitizing who needs to be sensitizing around the issues of that particular area, and then getting cabinet to endorse whatever that is. So it's a process.
Yeah. But you do have to get them to buy into it first.
Right.
But I think that you're mostly plain spoken, Caleb. But I think on this issue the court is a cop-out for a politician, because there are two separate things. Your rights are not subject to popular opinion, and a politician is a popular opinion representative. Those two can't mix. And so the courts present a cop-out that I washed my hands as Pontius Pilate. It wasn't me that changed the Buggery laws. It was a judge.
Yeah.
And so I washed my hands of it.
Welcome to governance.
So my thing about it is that, I think to follow up Marlene's question, which is that when you get the politicians to buy in, you create a direct line to change rather than going through this facade of a third party getting it done. I have never seen any politician or leader being asked what their views are about the LGBTI community, because we're not a population that is important to voting for somebody or not. I've never seen any person, leader or politician at any of the events, other than if they are forced to be there, just simply be there. And so I think that, do you feel as though our political engine, which is what actually changes legislation, is honest with where it is and where it should be based on international obligation and where it knows that its population and constituency is? That's my question.
First of all, our political leaders are not voted in by 300,000 people. They may be voted in by 3,000 to 5,000 people, depending on what their
Constituency.
Yeah.
their constituency numbers are. So let's put a reality check on that. Second of all, the population size estimate study of 2018, which was not done by us, but by the National AIDS Commission, the final report should reveal that there are 13,755 men who have sex with men and over 830 trans women in this country. So if you want to talk about voting, and that doesn't include lesbian and bisexual women, so we're a lot more. If you want to talk about voting bloc, and if you want to talk about the close election calls that we've had over the years, we are a voting bloc. And if our people were to ever collectively say, hey, politician, what are you doing for us? What's your position? X, Y, and Z, and do it collectively. The politicians would need to listen. So that's one. Two, with regards to this idea that politicians must have the status quo, there's something which the foreign minister for Guatemala said around the ICJ. He said, in order for us to save face, it is important for us to go through the litigation process to the ICJ, because this essential thing is written into our constitution. And so you begin to understand the power dynamics of governance, the power dynamics of change. Yeah. And so that's the reality. Yeah. In the meantime, it doesn't mean you can't constructively engage political leaders to take a stand on something and press them year after year to see what transpires.
Just to be clear, because we're quickly running out of time, there was also a second report that was put forward. Is it containing similar information as to what you've put forward to the UN?
Let's be clear. The UPR was a resolution adopted in March 2006, and the Human Rights Council then institutionalized it in June 2007. So it's a mechanism that allows civil society and state to issue its report. Yes. With regards to the International Covenant and the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, I'm so cold. Belize signed up to that years before, so they're two separate things. Yeah. And while they may have a few similar subject matter, there are also new recommendations or concerns which were incorporated into that report from a civil and political rights perspective. And that was the first report that's been submitted? For Belize, I'm happy to see that they were kind enough to submit a report after 18 years. Okay. And we were kind enough to issue a stakeholders report.
Can I ask this final question? It's kind of a bit off track, but you referenced it just when you were speaking with the foreign minister. I'm curious as to whether or not, like, other stakeholder groups, like the Chamber of Commerce or they have consultation with their membership on the ICJ issue. Is there an official position from UniBAM in relation to this political and issue as to Belizean identity on a whole?
On the issue of the ICJ, we've really not had a serious discussion.
What?
But with regards to mobilizing our people to be sensitized, we had our first session this weekend, actually. Our goal was 40. We managed to reach 38 people. And the representative was, in my mind, quite brilliant in making the information understandable and connecting to the audience. And I think we need more sessions like that.
PETAL had done one already a couple of years ago on the ICJ. I wanted Belizeans to, LGBTI people in Belize to know about the ICJ because these issues affect us as citizens of the country. And so we had done one. There has been no official position that we, the coalition, can say from the. I think from our people, I think it is to sensitize them first.
To educate.
Yes, to educate them, and maybe by the end of this year we can take a poll on where they stand.
Now we got to close off with one more thing. I think the report, as you spoke of, is really, putting something on the record. You have no guarantee what will come of it. It's this takes place, this is what we recommend, this is what we'd hope to see. There's still many people in our society who are going through different forms of discrimination, illegal activities, and they may not come forward. What do you say to them about, even if, I still think they should do a police report, but if they choose not to because of fear of discrimination, why should they come to you and put it in your files?
For us, on our end, they know that we'll do something with it. It becomes evidence, it becomes our form of research to advocate for very specific issues. In fact, that evidence informs what I talk about as an advocate. That's one. The second thing is, they know that at the end of the day that somebody have heard what they've said and provided some temporary support, even if it's not significant. And that's important in building the confidence of an individual to try to understand how the system can work for them. And so we play an immediate intermediary role between state structures and the community.
Very absent of state structures.
And I just wanted to bring it to PETAL too. You guys have your own mechanisms as well in reporting.
Yeah, and one of the things is because of the being young in the work, and also from the inception I wanted to do research, and so with a partner from the Netherlands, this year we are looking at doing research, and it will encompass all of these things that we talk about, so that women, LB women, lesbian, bisexual women, can be there and we can know things about this community. Like Caleb had said with the PSC, it didn't cover women, LB women, and so that is what we are looking into.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming in and providing this information to us.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead. Is there a way people can access the report, read it, get it from you?
It won't be online until a few months, but if somebody wants to report, we can send it, not a problem.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and take a break now. When we come back, we'll be joined by representatives of Digicel to talk about their post-expo sale. So stay tuned.